stored under the prior methods?
I'll jump in. Everybody hear me okay?
Hello. Yeah, I think we're going to have to. So all that data that is, it depends on what we're talking about. If it's at storage, yeah, you're probably going to have to re-encrypt, rekey, re-encrypt. If it's in transit, it's probably already been siphoned and at risk. The biggest thing is going to be that, you know, NCAA bracket type thing that NIST is doing right now to get down to the winners. And apparently there's going to be more than one winner, but you know, one, are we going to prove those 5 years later to be vulnerable? So I think there's going to be this whole, going back to the, not to beat a dead horse with the crypto agility thing, but there's going to be this reprogramming, right? Let's say we build into our encryption solution something that's lattice-based, some winner. There's 26 finalists or whatever it is right now, and they pick 5 of those. Unless you have one of those 5 in your product on day 0, there's going to be a reprogramming event as well. So it's not just, are you crypto safe, but are you crypto agile to reprogram? Are we going to do that in software? Are we going to do that in FPGA? What is that going to do to the overall system? There are a lot of questions to be asked to make yourself quantum safe when the time comes.
Right.
So.
So I had a general question. There's a lot of folks here from various different agencies and companies. Jay brought up an interesting point as far as management of your data, right? So everybody's talking about day 0 and you know, the quantum computer comes online and now things can be cracked. I'm curious if anybody's doing anything right now to get a handle on their current data, what it's encrypted with, so they have an awareness. So you can go back and this rekeying event, when it occurs, I know what data I have out there that's vulnerable, and I know where I need to start, right? Maybe no one has, but it's a question that popped into my mind. Anybody on the panel have any thoughts on that?
There are definitely agencies out there that have encrypted data that they don't know, in some cases, where it is. They don't know how it was encrypted. I know one of the organizations I worked with, people were encrypting data with their PIV cards, putting it out there, and they have no clue. You know, an encrypted file system gets encrypted using the PIV card to protect the key. They don't know where it's coming from, you know, and what are they going to do about it? There's got to be a lot of policies put in place in order to handle this. But policies are only good if you can enforce them. And how do you enforce those policies? That's really got to be a key management system so that you know what's been encrypted with what, especially up in the cloud. This is going to be a big deal. And the ones that are looking into it the most right now are our financial markets, because there's an awful lot of data that's going across the line. It's encrypted. And if somebody wanted to bring this country down, you crack that and you can take everything down. Stock market goes down, financial institutions go down, banks go down, and this country stops. And who wants to do that? The people that are developing the quantum right now outside of the US. So day 0, I think we're at day -1 right now. We got to start looking at it today, because we have to make sure that in the future things like that cannot happen, especially with all the data that's being encrypted and stored. I know with Microsoft, they are just increasing storage in Azure right and left as more companies are putting data up in there in order to use business intelligence, artificial intelligence, all that in order to sift through the petabytes of data that they're bringing in. And if people can get a hold of that, it's going to cause trouble.
Yeah, I'll just build on what Jay said there, that from a commercial perspective, especially financial institutes and other places like that, no, the answer is no. They're not looking at that. We often talk to them about data classification, which probably has more applicability in government and you know, federal space. But if you ask them what your most important data is to what's the stuff that you don't care about, they very rarely know at all, right, what it is. We're actually developing tools and toolkits, data discovery products that will go out there and find this because people do not know where their data is. So it's not just, doom and gloom on the panel. It's we're actually building products to do that because people are like, I don't even know what I have out there. Can you help me find what I have, then organize and classify it, and then help me build out encryption and key management solutions to protect it? Because we really don't know. And the further you get away from industries where you've been required to protect your data, the more the more primitive, I guess it is, right? They're not doing much of anything. And, you have a bunch of information that's going out there, being stored, being transferred, not being tracked, and then sometimes we think we're deleting it, and we're not really sure if we are or we aren't, right? And the amount of data generation that we're doing is exceeding the capacity that we're building. So where is it all going, right? And where is it all going to wind up?
Question?
Would you happen to know who in the government is kind of getting after this problem, say the DARPA, or are you trying to partner up with, a vendor to try to get after this problem set?
It's NIST.
It's this.
NIST is the one that is leading it with NSA. NSA, of course, is wanting the encryption in that, and NIST is looking at the ways that it needs to be used. How do we manually take care of this? How do we automatically take care of this? DARPA is only in it from the standpoint of DoD, but NIST is doing it for federal.
Jay, when you refer to NIST, are you speaking about crypto agility, or are you also speaking about kind of the re-encryption and key management data problem?
It's basically everything.
Okay.
Okay, they look at the derived stuff. They look at NIST and NSA were the ones that jointly put out saying, these are the things that we need to look at for the future. NIST has the money and their partnerships with industry to look at that, as Stan was saying. It's great that we get a new encryption algorithm, but unless there's products that can support that when it comes out, they're useless. I remember when ECC came out. This was a big thing. This was, 12 years ago? There was virtually nobody that had anything that could do ECC itself. Even today, very few. Mainly because of people like Signacom who want to license out there. And a lot of people don't understand ECC. Just because you say ECC doesn't mean you and I have the same algorithm. Because there's the points tables, there's the curves, everything is different. That's why we have P256, P384, P521. But you go over to Europe, they don't understand those. RSA, it's the same no matter what, but ECC is not. So it hasn't really caught on as well. But is it the way to go? ECC is much better. It's faster, it's harder to decrypt, but quantum's going to get it. So whatever else they come up with, we're going to be using symmetric keys that are 1024, 2048 or above, and we're encrypted. AES-256, just like triple is going to go away, and whatever the next one is. NIST is the one that's running the contest in conjunction with NSA.
Question?
As it pertains to the quantum threat, are you in the industry aware of any response from the purveyors and custodians of smartphones and tablets to respond to sort of help users feel safe? And then by extension, are you aware of any response or adaptability of social media networks? I'm just thinking in terms of being the most massive and widest scope of impact. One of those sort of modalities was hacked into.
That's a very good situation to look into. The issue there is protecting the keys on the phones. There's not a lot of phones that have TPMs inside. Even the iPhone. Okay, everything's done in software. Yes, they have their key vault, but the private keys are not protected anyway. There's no biometric, there's no PIN, there's no nothing. So the phones are the most vulnerable. Tablets. Now you start getting down to laptops. Okay, they have TPMs. We can make those a little more secure. But with phones and that, they don't want to go through the cost. That iPhone now is $1,000. Put a TPM in, and it's going to be $1,500, $1,800. And why does my daughter, my teenager, need a phone that's secure. Federal government's asking for it, DOD's asking for it, and they don't have anything right now.
If you're asking whether quantum's affecting them now, not to my experience, not at all. I mean, that's a high velocity market, but I'm not worried about years out. Look, the sales problem is sell what you have and convince them that, and usually in the face of somebody that's trying to respond to a problem. So that kind of market, which is more in line with where I am, is just something they're glad somebody's going to fix eventually if they have to. That's kind of how it is. I mean, that's the edge stuff that you know Lloyd has on the schedule.
We'll get there. Yeah.
Check.
It's hardwired, that's
There you go. There you go.
Everybody hear us okay?
Okay, so any other questions on quantum in general for these guys? No? Okay, so there were a couple comments I think Jay and Stan made about data and the large amounts of data that are being pumped into places like Azure, and AWS, and the various different clouds that are out there. I wanted to kind of transition to edge and IoT, because that's kind of another hot topic that's out there. I think Julian touched on it a little bit as well. So today we see computing being driven closer to the edge. You mentioned smartphones and tablets and social media. So whether it's a consumer operating a self-driving vehicle, like a Tesla, or a sensor in a plant monitoring some type of valve in a chemical reactor, there's all these devices out there that are computing, right? Interestingly enough, yesterday, the CEO of Microsoft, Satya Nadella, gave a talk in DC. And he talked about his vision for the future and how it relates to Microsoft and devices and Azure and so forth. And he kind of talked about this converging world where edge computing devices would crunch data, do some pre-processing, and supply it back to a large cloud environment that would do further processing. So AI, different data acquisition technology. But there's a lot of privacy, there's a lot of security, there's a lot of other concerns that come into play when you're dealing with a large number of devices. And I think the estimate that they threw out, or that he threw out yesterday, was 50 billion edge devices by 2030. It's a lot of devices. So there's some real practical problems from a security space concern when you start talking about devices at that scale, right? So there's PKI concerns, there's encryption concerns, there's data in motion concerns, and there's privacy concerns. You talked about social media and your smartphone. If it's pumping tons of data up to the cloud, right? It's my data. It's where I've been, what I'm doing, what I've surfed, whatever. I have some concerns about that. I want it to be protected. So I want to turn it over to the panel and talk about IoT in general, edge computing sort of as a classification of devices, and talk a little bit about the different perspectives there, right? So what should industry be doing to ensure that there's privacy, security, and so forth baked into these different platforms that ultimately will be supplying data back to some cloud entity? And are there sort of management and infrastructure concerns about how we deploy securely those devices, PKI, key management, identity management, and so forth? So I'll start with Chris again. I think this is kind of in your space as well.
I look at it this way. Edge computing is about pushing decision-making farther and farther away from the cloud, from the network, pushing decision-making farther away and making it more autonomous. In the process of that, you're going to more and more constrained devices. And I'm not talking about cell phones, which aren't resource constrained particularly. I am talking about the sensors, cameras, seed planters on the back of a tractor, right? Those are constrained devices where the autonomy and the decision-making is being pushed. Then you map that against cyber defense standpoint? Well, that's easy to articulate. There's prevention, there's detection, there's response. If you look at those constrained devices, which is where this is just going to continuously push towards, prevention works. Prevention, specifically including encryption, which when it comes to protection with low horsepower, encryption is right up there as an optimal solution. But you get to detection, you're probably not going to be implementing detection on resource-limited devices. It's not going to happen. And ditto for the response. And so what does that tell you from an architectural standpoint? You want to minimize the communication, right? You want to minimize the communication because that's the vulnerability. People compromising the resource-limited edge devices, and it moves upstream or vice versa, right? So that's what you need to do from that standpoint. And I would say that I wasn't going to mention that along those lines. So the other thing is, architecturally, you almost need to start redefining your architecture so you've got the ability to protect those devices. It doesn't, what I just described about protecting them and limiting the communication to the bare minimum doesn't fit into most architecture, right? You're talking about now needing to re-architect so that those devices are properly protected. Now, it's not a master re-architecture, but it is an architecture that's not graceful of today's architecture. And so I think if you think about the edge device as a phone, you kind of come to the wrong conclusion from the standpoint that phones do have a lot of horsepower. But keep pushing it out, because that's what's going to happen. And you'll find that you can try to prevent compromises, but you're not going to detect them out there. It's not until there's quantum
Right.
edge devices. But that's kind of how we look at it. And yeah, this is a problem that people needed to solve yesterday because it started to get pushed by personal devices getting mixed in with corporate devices. I mean, that was one of the momentums that started this along these lines. And so this is a problem that we face today. And you can do certain things now, and encryption is really, and key management goes with it, is really one of the few things you can really do now. But from then on out, it's really going to be architecturally oriented so that you can protect the communications and minimize the communications.
So just a follow-on question to that. So architecturally, we look at deployments of devices, and there's cryptographic binding, you got certificates, you've got different ways to validate that hardware that's in your network deserves to be there, and it's configured and operating in a way that you sanction. So with some of these compute constrained devices, are there things that are being done or should be being done to kind of mimic that type of posture, to say, okay, I know that this sensor that's controlling my nuclear reactor cooling valve is the right one, right? It's somehow cryptographically assured to be not tampered with, not compromised, and so forth.
The trend that I'm aware of that is involved in actually along those lines really is how do you apply machine learning so that you know what should happen and what shouldn't happen. Now, I've tried machine learning in the past when it comes to what should and shouldn't happen, and I spent a lot of other people's money trying to solve that unsuccessfully. But if you make it bite-sized and say, in this sub-part of the network, in this part of the network, in this part of the interface, can you use enough machine learning to determine what should and should not happen? That's solvable. And you can now say, okay, this is the part of the network that interfaces with my edge devices, with my IoT devices. You can put machine learning in there, whether it's purpose-built router or something along those lines. You can put in a machine learning there to understand what should and should not happen for those devices. Right. That is a solvable problem.
Okay, so that's kind of the detection aspect you were talking about. Okay. So, Jay, from a PKI key management perspective, we're talking about 50 billion devices at some point, all pumping data back to the Microsoft cloud in some instance. What types of things are going on to kind of make sure that that is a safe and okay thing to be doing?
This is something that's been looked at for a number of years. As the number of devices proliferate, and as Chris was saying, how do you trust the data coming back from them? How do you trust what you're ingesting? That becomes like a PKI. You got a certificate. Okay, I signed the data, I sent it up. Well, now you got another problem. You've got a very limited device out on the end. That cert is about to expire. How do I update it? I mean, that's key management. That's certificate lifecycle management. How do I update that? That becomes a problem because now that device, which is limited in its processing power, limited in the memory it has, does it have the right code in there that you're going to use, once every 2-3 years? They're not going to put it in. They're going to expect you to go buy another new one, put a new cert on it, ship it out to the field and do it. One interesting thing that's coming up, and it's happening in the medical field, when we start talking about IoT devices, implantable pacemakers, where there is a monitoring device in your house connected to your router that's sending information back to your doctor. Who do I want to come in and make adjustments to that? Do I want somebody, President of the United States has a pacemaker. Do I want the Chinese going in and shutting that off? It has to be trusted. I mean, these are real life things that they're thinking about. How many of you ever seen the movie G-Force? It was put out a long time ago. It's a hilarious movie. It's about the Internet of Things. It got microprocessors and everything. Somebody took it over and made monsters out of them. And who solved the problem? Guinea pigs. But I mean, that movie, as funny as it is where we're going today with the massive announce, 50 billion devices out there. If anybody can get control of that, they could shut down nuclear reactors. They could shut down submarines. They could shut down our ships. You got to protect the keys. You got to know that everything is trusted.
So follow-on question for Stan. So we talked about compute-constrained devices, and I know that a lot of them have specialized network transports, specialized protocols that allow them to take advantage of the fact that they don't have a lot of horsepower to send data over the network. So since you're kind of more entrenched in the networking side with the high-speed encryptors, are you seeing anything as far as enabling those types of transports in bigger boxes to get them onto the internet?
Yeah, so great question. Actually, a few things I was thinking about, and Jay's scaring me, so I'll lighten it up. Probably scaring us all a little bit, so I'll lighten it up a little. I just think there's differences. I watched Bob Metcalf speak on it at one point, talking about, he's Mr. Ethernet, so he talked about the Internet of Things. And I think a great question he posed to the audience was, what are the things? Mm-hmm. Right? What are the things that we're trying to connect? That's going to be first. What are the things that we're trying to protect? That's going to be important, right? So there's a difference.